Hey guys, today's story is a little different. Picture a quiet kitchen at dawn, faded light through the window, toast burning, and your mother not looking you in the eye as she says, "We're helping your brother this year, you understand, right?" I was 17. I understood perfectly. What I didn't understand until much later was how deep that choice would echo, and how far I'd have to climb just to prove I even deserved the same air. My name is David Tran. I'm 26 now. Just graduated top of my class in engineering from Stanford. But I didn't get there on a straight path. And if you think karma's slow, wait until you hear this. So, before you get pulled in, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually believe that betrayal always comes back around. Drop a comment, where are you watching from, and has anyone ever made you feel second place in your own family? Now sit back, let the room go quiet, and let me tell you how it really went down. My older brother's name is Matthew. He's 2 years older, charming in the way that makes teachers smile and neighbors rave. Varsity soccer, straight A's, always knew what to say and when. When he got into Columbia, the family celebrated like someone had just won the lottery. Dad opened a bottle of wine I didn't know we had. Mom made her sticky rice dish, the one she usually reserved for New Year's. They paid for it all. Tuition, dorms, books, flights, internships, even off-campus housing senior year. He called home for grocery money and they wired it without question. I remember watching Mom filling out the FAFSA forms, combing through tax returns, murmuring about opportunities and building a name for the family. I thought I was next. I thought that's what we were doing, paving the road for both of us, one at a time. But when I got into UC Davis a year later, the tone shifted. "It's not the same situation," Dad said. "Money's tighter now. Your brother had better grades," Mom added, as if that explained the lack of options. "We can't pay for both." I didn't ask them to choose. But they already had. They told me it would build character if I figured it out myself. That David's a hard worker, he'll find a way. That I was resilient. They said it with pride, like assigning me poverty was some sort of blessing. So I did what I always did, made a way. I enrolled in community college. Took the bus at 5:30 every morning to get to class, then worked part-time at a tech repair shop until closing. I studied between customers, ate noodles out of a paper bowl in the back room. I watched my classmates drop out one by one. But I stayed. Not because I was stronger. Just more stubborn. Meanwhile, Matthew sent home photos from New York campus trees in the fall, dorm parties, him in a Columbia hoodie on the steps of the library. He posted about internships at JP Morgan. One time, I saw a tagged picture of him holding champagne with a caption that read, "My family made this possible." I didn't like it. I stared at it for 20 minutes, then locked my phone and walked back to class. The thing is, I didn't hate him. He didn't ask for special treatment. But he accepted it like it was owed. And my parents? They made excuses for him before he even opened his mouth. That year, I finished with a 3.9 GPA and transferred to UC Berkeley. No congratulations. No celebration. Just, hope the commute's not too bad. I paid for every credit hour with scholarships, grant scavenging, and side gigs. I sold refurbished laptops to freshmen. Drove Uber on weekends. Tutored calculus on Zoom. At night, I'd sit in my tiny off-campus studio and wonder if I was making progress or just getting better at surviving. One day, I asked my mom casually, cautiously, why they never helped me the way they helped Matthew. She paused, then said, "You're the kind of son who does fine on his own. He needed it more." That was the moment something small and fragile inside me broke. Not because I needed the money, but because I had always believed love was supposed to be, even if not equal, then at least fair. I stopped calling home after that. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. I had to get free of their definition of me before I could define myself. So I worked harder. Learned faster. Pushed deeper. And by the time I applied for Stanford's engineering program, I didn't tell them. When I got in, I didn't tell them that either. I just packed my things, booked a one-way flight, and disappeared into the grind. But the day I got the call saying I'd been selected as valedictorian of my graduating class, I picked up the phone. I called my mother. And I said, "I want you and Dad to come to my graduation." Front row. She was silent for a beat, then said, "We'd be honored." They had no idea what I had planned. I wish I could say that after that phone call, something in them softened. That maybe hearing my voice, hearing what I'd accomplished without them, brought some clarity. But if it did, they never let on. What I got was a polite yes, a travel itinerary, and a request for directions to the Vanillas if they were attending a wedding for someone else's son. They didn't ask how I got there. They didn't ask what I studied. They just said they were proud. No matter what. That for see no matter what kept echoing in my head. Pride, it seemed, required no understanding. It was automatic. Convenient. Selective. They hadn't seen me in 4 years. Not when I left for Stanford. Not when I spent 2 summers sleeping on a friend's couch during unpaid internships. Not when I was hospitalized with pneumonia from working 3 jobs through flu season and skipped the follow-up appointment because I couldn't afford the copay. But now that I was valedictorian, now that I had a stage and a spotlight, they came. The irony didn't hit me all at once. It came in waves. Like when I remembered my first year at community college, eating half a granola bar for dinner so I could make a textbook rental payment. Or when I overheard my dad telling an uncle on the phone, "Matthew was always the one with potential. David's more grounded." As if practicality was a consolation prize for not being exceptional. When I was 14, I broke my wrist during a pickup basketball game. Matthew cried louder than I did. Mom rushed over and held him. Said my pain wasn't as bad as his fear. That moment never left me. That was the blueprint. My pain was always background noise to someone else's performance. And so when they watched Matthew walk the stage at Columbia, they saw themselves. They saw his robes, his smile, his future all dressed in their legacy. They beamed. Toasted. Framed his diploma. I think my mom even embroidered a pillow with the school's seal. They never framed my GED. When I started earning scholarships, I sent them the award letters. Dozens of them. Never heard back. Once I called to follow up and my dad said, "Well, we figured you'd tell us if it was important." I stopped telling them after that. But what they didn't realize, what they never realized, was that I wasn't chasing their attention anymore. I was building a mirror. Every achievement, every sleepless night, every grin, it was a glass pane. Clear. Sharp. And eventually, I was going to hold it up and let them see themselves. Because they had made a decision. Not just once, but over and over. When they chose not to co-sign a loan. When they bought Matthew a new laptop but told me to borrow one from the school library. When they forgot my 21st birthday, but flew across the country for his promotion dinner. They called it character building. Said I was independent. Said I didn't need help because I figured things out. What they meant was, you're not worth the investment. The more I succeeded, the more uncomfortable they became. I remember visiting for Thanksgiving one year, me only time home during college. I sat at the table, telling them about a project I'd led on campus that got published in an academic journal. Halfway through my sentence, my mom cut in to ask Matthew if he wanted more mashed potatoes. They didn't hear me. Not because I was quiet, but because I didn't fit their narrative. Matthew was the achiever. I was the one who would be fine. They needed me to stay small so his light would shine brighter. And for a long time, I played that role. Even thanked them for it. But now, I had their attention. My name in the program. A solo seat at the top of my class. My speech printed, reviewed, rehearsed. I'd written it carefully, not out of anger, but precision. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Laid bare in front of thousands. Clean. Unapologetic. They were coming for pictures. I was coming with receipts. The night before graduation, I stood at the podium during rehearsal, staring out at the sea of empty chairs. The lights above made the air shimmer. It was quiet. Still. Sacred. I closed my eyes and thought about that kid on the bus at 5:30 a.m. Numb hands. Cracked phone. A thermos of black coffee and a textbook with pages falling out. He didn't know he'd end up here. But he believed he was worth more than they gave him. And finally, someone was going to hear it. The next morning I suited up. Pressed navy gown, silver tassel. I walked across campus like I belonged there. Because I did. And as I took my seat on stage, I saw the front row center. Mom in pearls. Dad in a blazer I'd never seen him wear before. Smiling like nothing had ever gone wrong. Like this moment belonged to them. It didn't. And in a few minutes they'd know it. They looked proud. That's what hit me first. My parents sat with their shoulders back, smiling as if they had personally delivered me to this moment. As if I were the inevitable product of their love, their sacrifice, their belief. It was almost cinematic, the golden lighting, the music swelling, the perfectly pressed gowns fluttering as students filed in. But there was one difference. This story didn't belong to them. Not this time. They didn't know how close I came to not making it. There were semesters I registered late because my paycheck didn't clear in time. I'd stand in line at the bursar's office, papers in hand, pretending I was there for a routine inquiry when I was actually praying they wouldn't drop me for non-payment. I remember once spending the last $73 in my bank account on a used circuit board kit, hoping to salvage a failing grade on a design project. That kit now sits on my bookshelf, burned, soldered, and ugly, but it passed. Barely. I lived in the margins. While my classmates networked at events with catered spreads and branded folders, I worked security shifts at campus libraries. I'd stand by glass doors watching professors and donors toast each other in tailored suits while I wore black polos and steel-toed boots. I was invisible until I was needed, and then discarded again. But I made it work. I pieced my education together like a patchwork quilt, scraps of time, fragments of energy, hours stolen between jobs and obligations. I mastered the art of being unnoticed, because invisibility meant no one could question whether I belonged. It meant I could survive without needing permission. Until Stanford. That was the first time I stopped hiding. I remember reading the acceptance letter 3 times, then folding it neatly and sliding it into a drawer. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to see what it felt like to have something completely untouched by them. It felt clean. Mine. The first year was brutal. Everyone else seemed to arrive pre-programmed with connections and confidence. I brought grit and silence. The imposter syndrome was real. But so was my work ethic. And slowly, something shifted. Professors started asking for my input. Peers started deferring to me in group projects. By the second year, I was leading engineering teams, publishing research, speaking on panels. I built a reputation not as the smartest in the room but the most unshakable. Because when you've walked alone for this long, no one can take your seat, you carved it yourself. That's what my parents didn't see. They saw a stage. They didn't see the years I spent building the steps. They didn't see me at midnight, breaking down from stress but finishing the code anyway. They didn't see me selling my childhood bike to pay for a required software license. They didn't see the days I wanted to quit and didn't because quitting would have confirmed everything they thought I was. Less than. Unworthy. A backup plan. At one point, I considered not inviting them at all. Just walking the stage, taking the diploma, and leaving without a word. Letting the silence speak. But then I remembered what silence had already cost me. No. They needed to be there. They needed to see what they never helped build. They needed to hear the version of me they refused to believe in. I had my speech memorized, but I still held the printed copy in my hand as I walked to the podium. It wasn't fear that made me grip it, it was reverence. Because this wasn't just a speech. It was a eulogy for the son they never truly knew. As I looked out over the crowd, I found their faces. They were beaming. My mother raised her phone. My father nodded as if to say, "There he is. Our boy." And for the first time in years I smiled back. But they didn't recognize what kind of smile it was. Because behind it was a storm. I adjusted the mic. Cleared my throat. Took a breath that felt like I was finally surfacing from years underwater. And I began. To everyone who believed I couldn't be here. There was a pause. Small. Intentional. Enough to make the air crackle. Thank you? Some in the crowd chuckled, not quite sure if it was sarcasm or humility. It was either. It was war dressed in truth. I went on to speak about what it meant to build a future from broken promises. What it meant to walk a road paved for someone else and still find your way forward. I talked about the importance of resilience not as a virtue, but as a necessity when you're invisible in your own home. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. But when I said, I paid for every credit with sweat, I saw my mother's smile falter. When I said, some of us had to prove our worth to the people who should have seen it from the beginning, my father looked down. By the time I said, this diploma is not a product of love, it's a product of survival, they weren't smiling at all. And I hadn't even gotten to the part that would make their faces go pale. There's something strangely quiet about public embarrassment. You expect gasps, whispers, eyes darting around. But when the truth lands just right, undeniable, specific, sharp, and it doesn't make a sound. It just freezes people in place. Like they're waiting for someone to laugh, to cut the tension. But the punchline never comes. That's what happened when I turned my speech from survival into revelation. I had written 2 endings. One was polite. Predictable. The kind of closer everyone expects, thanking mentors, offering hopeful platitudes, a neat bow on a long journey. The other? It was the one I never thought I'd use. Until I saw my mother tilt her phone sideways for a better angle. Until I saw my father tap the camera icon like this was their moment. Their win. I looked out at the sea of students' robes rustling, mortarboards tilted, some blinking back tears, and I felt something shift in my spine. A click. A moment of decision. Not anger. Not revenge. Just clarity. I unfolded the second speech. I want to thank my parents for teaching me about value. I began. A few people clapped. My parents smiled wider. Not values, I continued. Value. As in cost. As in worth. As in what gets what and why. The clapping stopped. I learned early on that sometimes, the only difference between gifted and ignored is which child speaks louder. Or maybe which child you love more. A rustle in the front rows. My mother lowered her phone, her brow tight. My brother got Ivy League tuition, monthly stipends, applause for every breath. I got told to toughen up. That it would build character. That I was strong enough to go without. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The mic carried every word with brutal intimacy. They told me I didn't need support, that I could handle it on my own. And they were right. I could. I did. By then, the silence was almost thick enough to touch. My college journey wasn't funded by family. It was funded by overtime shifts, scholarship committees, and ramen noodles. I made it here not because someone believed in me but because I had to prove I deserved to exist. There were a few audible breaths, shallow, uncomfortable. Like the room had collectively flinched. In a way, I should thank them, I added. Because survival shaped me sharper than love ever could. I scanned the audience again. Some students stared, wide-eyed. A few nodded, like they felt seen for the first time. I made a mental note of that. Then I looked back at my parents. Their faces had gone pale. My father's jaw locked. My mother blinked twice, almost slow motion, like her body was buffering reality. I continued. To those of you who had to fight to be here, who weren't handed a future but carved one out of resistance, this degree is yours, too. And to those who only showed up for the photo? Don't worry. That flash will fade a lot faster than the silence you left behind. Then I closed the speech. No applause, not at first. Just stunned stillness. A pause that split the air in half. And then one brave soul clapped. Another joined in. Then more. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't euphoric. It was real. The kind of applause you don't hear in stadiums. You hear it in funeral homes, in courtrooms, in quiet acknowledgments between people who know pain by name. I stepped away from the podium. As I walked back to my seat, I passed my parents. My mom's mouth was slightly open, like she'd forgotten how to speak. My dad looked older, smaller. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. That night, I skipped the family dinner they had planned. They waited at a restaurant I'd never walk into. I turned off my phone and sat on the rooftop of my apartment with a greasy burger and a ginger ale, watching the sunset brush gold across a skyline I had conquered alone. A few hours later, I posted a photo of my diploma with a caption. Funded by faith in myself. That was enough. It got thousands of likes. Dozens of messages from people I didn't know saying, "Thank you for saying what I never could." My parents saw it, of course. They sent a group message. My father wrote, "That speech hurt, David." It felt like an ambush. My mother followed with, "We were just trying to do what was right for everyone. If we failed you, we didn't mean to." And I stared at those words so careful, so distant, and realized something. They didn't feel bad about what they did. They felt bad they got caught. After the message from my parents, I didn't respond right away. I let it sit. Not because I didn't have words, but because, for once, I didn't owe them any. Their discomfort was theirs to sit with. For years, I'd been the one carrying it. The silence, the unfairness, the pressure to not make them look bad. But that weight? I dropped it on stage. And now they were the ones squirming. The morning after graduation, I woke up to chaos. Not regret. Not shame. But headlines. A local station had picked up a clip of my speech, just the part about paying for my brother's tuition and not mine. Someone had filmed it on their phone, posted it on TikTok, and it exploded overnight. The caption? When the forgotten son becomes valedictorian. A few hours later, it was trending. I didn't expect that. But I wasn't surprised either. Because I'd hit a nerve. Not just in my family, but in hundreds, maybe thousands of others. People started sharing their own stories. Siblings left behind. Gifted kids dismissed. Parents choosing favorites and calling it tough love. There were tweets, stitches, duets. One comment read, My brother got a car for graduation. I got a bus pass. I felt this in my bones. Another said, my mom told me I was her safe bet, that I didn't need support. I haven't spoken to her in 4 years. The flood of validation wasn't what healed might, just made me realize I wasn't crazy. That my pain had company. And that the mirror I'd held up was now facing thousands of homes, not just mine. But the most surprising message came in my inbox 2 days later from Matthew. He'd seen the speech. Of course he had. He kept it short. I didn't know they did that. I'm sorry. No excuses. No justifications. Just 10 words. And somehow, that made it harder. Because in that moment, I knew he wasn't the villain. He benefited, yes. But the ones who orchestrated the imbalance, the ones who could have stopped it, were Mom and Dad. And they still hadn't owned it. They asked me to keep it private after the video went viral. Private. As if I'd leaked a state secret. As if their image mattered more than my reality. My father emailed again, this time longer. He talked about difficult choices, limited resources, and how they always thought I was the one who'd figure it out. He ended with, "You proved us right." He meant it as praise. It felt like a slap. I thought about replying. Thought about telling him that making me prove I could do it alone wasn't the compliment he thought it was. That all it meant was they bet on my strength, and then used it as an excuse not to show up. But I didn't type a word. Instead, I called a journalist. The same one who messaged me on Instagram after the video blew up. They asked for an interview. I agreed. Not to escalate, but to finish the story on my terms. We met at a cafe near campus. They were respectful, sharp, focused. I told them about community college. About ramen in the back of a tech shop. About the moment my mother said Matthew needed the help more. About the silence that followed every time I succeeded without permission. The article went live a week later. Valedictorian reveals quiet cost of unequal families. It wasn't a takedown. It was a truth-telling. It talked about structural favoritism. Generational pressure. The way families reward obedience and call it love. My name wasn't in the headline, but my story was in every line. My parents never acknowledged the article. But Lila, my cousin, texted, "They're furious. But I'm proud of you." That meant more than I expected. Because sometimes, it's not the apologies that heal you. It's the solidarity. The people who see your full story and say, that wasn't fair and it wasn't your fault. By then, job offers had started coming in. Companies that had passed on me months ago were now reconsidering. Speaking invitations poured in. Panels on education, equity, grit. I accepted one. Not because I wanted the attention, but because I wanted to meet the others like me. The ones who didn't get the ribbon, but still ran the race. A month after graduation, I finally replied to my parents. One message. "You taught me to do it without you." I did. Be careful what you build, some kids don't come home. I didn't get a response. And I didn't need one. Because I wasn't writing for closure. I was writing an ending. And this time, it was mine. The house I grew up in had 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and one golden rule: make it look perfect. Clean smiles and holiday cards, matching outfits for school concerts, polite nods at family gatherings. But inside that house, behind every polished picture frame, lived a quiet hierarchy. My brother, the firstborn, the achiever, the investment. Me? The fallback plan. The background. The one who'd figure it out. And for a while, I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I just succeeded loud enough, that hierarchy would disappear. I was wrong. After the speech, after the video, after the article, everything that had been carefully layered in silence peeled away like old paint under rain. My parents didn't say much right after. No calls. No apology. Just a text from my mother 2 days later. "We didn't realize you felt that way." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, anger had long since dried up. But because I no longer needed anything from them, not even acknowledgement. I thought that would be the end of it. But the fallout started quietly. My mom, who used to run 3 committees at church, quietly stepped down. A few of the other mothers in her circle had seen the video. Some even forwarded it in group chats. At first, she told people it was just a misunderstanding. But the whispers didn't stop. And whispers are the termites of any perfect image. My dad, who prided himself on being respected in the community, stopped going to local business mixers. I heard from my cousin that someone confronted him, asked if what I said was true. He exaggerated, my father reportedly replied. But I hadn't. Not a single word. The facts stood. Publicly. Permanently. And people noticed. One day, a family friend I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me, "I'm sorry. I always wondered why they treated you like an accessory." That message did more to validate my years of silence than anything my parents ever said. Then came the inevitable. My father called. I didn't pick up. But he called again. And again. Finally, I answer not for him, but for me. Because part of healing is knowing when to close a door with your own hand. We agreed to meet at a small diner not far from the neighborhood I used to walk through as a kid. He arrived early. Same press shirt. Same expression, somewhere between remorse and performance. He stood to hug me. I didn't move. He sat down slowly. For a moment, he just looked at me like he was waiting for me to say something that would make it easier. I didn't. So he started. "Your mother and we had no idea you were carrying all that." I kept my eyes on him. "Then you weren't paying attention." He blinked. "We thought you were fine. You were always the one who didn't need help." I cut in. "Handled everything? Made do?" He nodded slowly, as if my pain confirmed his good judgment. "Exactly. You were strong." "No," I said quietly. "I was abandoned." He flinched at the word. "That's not fair. It's not supposed to be," I said. "It's just true." He looked down at his coffee. Stirred it once. Twice. Said, "We made choices. We prioritized what we thought mattered. Maybe we got it wrong." I let the silence stretch. It was the first honest sentence he'd said. "You didn't get it wrong," I finally said. "You just didn't think I mattered as much." He opened his mouth, closed it again. His hand was shaking. That used to make me feel guilty. Now, it just felt like accountability. "What do you want from us?" he asked eventually. I leaned back, arms folded. "Nothing. That's the point. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me." He nodded again, slower this time. He looked like a man finally realizing the cost of what he'd spent decades ignoring. "Can we fix this?" he asked. I paused. "You can start by listening. Not defending. Not rewriting. Just listen." He said he would. I didn't know if I believed him. But I stood up. That was enough. I walked out without a hug, without a promise, without the need to make it look perfect. A week later, I packed for Seattle. The startup offer was solid, the team excited to have me. I'd rented a 1-bedroom near the water. No grand view, but sunlight poured in like peace. Before leaving, I boxed up a few photos from childhood. I didn't burn them. I didn't break them. I just stored them in a closet, like a book I had finished and didn't need to read again. And that was the most powerful part of it all. The story didn't end with them. It ended with me. Walking forward. Without noise. Without need. And without the weight of ever having to prove my worth again. Some stories end in fireworks. Some end in silence. Mine ended somewhere in between, more like the quiet pop of a pressure seal breaking after years of holding everything in. I didn't burn the bridge. I didn't shout across it. I just stopped walking toward people who had no interest in meeting me halfway. For a long time, I believed that if I worked hard enough, they'd see me. That one day, I'd stand in the light and they'd finally clap. But here's what I've learned. When someone only applauds you in public, but never supports you in private, that's not love. That's theater. We're taught that family is sacred. That parents always do their best. That silence means strength. But sometimes, silence just means survival. And survival isn't the same thing as being okay. I wasn't okay for a long time. I just got good at functioning without needing anything from the people who were supposed to give me everything. And in doing that, I found a different kind of strength, the kind that doesn't beg for validation, doesn't chase apologies, doesn't wait for someone else to see your worth. The speech wasn't revenge. It was release. It was the final time I'd carry their version of me on my back. So if you're watching this and your story sounds familiar, if you've ever had to stand on your own while the people who should have lifted you up chose to watch instead, this is for you. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You already survived. You already won. And sometimes, justice looks like walking across a stage with your head high, your heart steady, and the truth finally out in the open.